What's up everybody? So in this video we're going to be doing some questions on 9.2. So this is everything related to the phloem, okay? So let's just get started. What is the role of the plant structure in the diagram? So what is the role of this plant structure in this diagram? So try it by yourself as usual, but let me explain something that'll make this easier to understand. So what you're seeing here, this structure is essentially this one here, okay? This pipe called a sieve tube cell that behaves a lot like a sieve. Okay, a sieve. You know, a sieve, it has like a little holes and it likes to filter and separate things in the kitchen. So this is the same thing, right? And we can see here that we're looking at this sieve. Okay, it has a companion cell attached to it. And here's the companion cell attached to it, okay? Now, what is the purpose of this thing, this exact tube, okay? So basically, what the purpose of this tube is this. So we know that, for example, we're looking at this image here, and this image is occurring between here and here, so between the leaf and the fruit. So basically, we have a source. A source is a cell in the leaf that is going to make energy, make sucrose or organic molecules. So we're going to represent that with this candy bar, and it will get transported here into this companion cell, okay? Into this companion cell, because at the end of the day, this source cell is trying to make this material or this organic matter and trying to send it to the sink, okay? And the sink could be the fruit or any other cell that needs this sucrose, that needs this energy, okay? So after it sends it into the companion cell, now the companion cell will spend some energy, okay? Some energy to transport this organic molecule into the sieve tube cell. Now, for this organic molecule to move to the sink, it first needs to move down the sieve tube cell. But how does it do that? It does that with this mechanism. So basically, we know the xylem has a bunch of water in it. Once this material builds up inside here, in other words, a lot of it builds up, so we have a bunch of them building up, it's going to get very concentrated. And we know that osmosis happens when water tries to move to even out the concentration gradient. So essentially, water will now transport through this transporter from the xylem into the sieve tube cell. And as it moves in, now the pressure builds up. We call this hydrostatic pressure. Hydro means water, okay? So hydrostatic pressure is going to build up, and that's going to end up pushing these candies down the pipe, okay? Down the pipe. Now, this allows them now to reach the companion cell down here. Now, again, we're going to need energy to bring them in. Why? Why do we need energy? Because in reality, there's already a lot of this molecule in here. So to bring more of it inside, you have to bring it against its concentration gradient. And so you're going to need some energy. So then we bring it in. Okay, so now we know what the sieve tube does, okay? We know what the purpose of this structure is, because ultimately it's now brought to the sink that can use it as energy, because the sink is unable to make its own organic molecule, so it depends on the source to send it towards it. It depends on the provider, okay? So going back to the question, does it do A, carry water for the transpiration stream? No, the xylem carries water for the transpiration stream, right? That's the purpose of the xylem, to carry water from the roots all the way to the parts of the plant that need it. Does it do B, active translocation of sugars? Yes, it does. So basically, the source is making this sugar, and translocation is a word that you need to understand, a definition word that is used to describe the movement, okay, the movement of these sugars, translocation, okay? So active translocation of sugars. Why active? Why active? Because we need energy. Active means you require energy, whereas passive means you don't. So active means energy. So we need, so that's why it's called active translocation, because this process that they're pointing at, this diagram, requires ATP, right? So it's going to be B. So why not C or D? Filters waste material from the light-independent reactions. So we know that all these sugars are made through photosynthesis, right? Essentially. Now, we know that in the process of making these sugars through photosynthesis, we also make some waste, okay? And we know that along with these sugars, waste will build up, okay? Now, we know the purpose of these sieve tube cells is to move these good products, these sugars, their main purpose is not to move waste, although they may move some waste, okay? But here they're saying they filter waste material. So that's not their main function. Their main function is the active translocation of sugar. So this is really a very, very minor function and doesn't actually happen in this specific structure. Okay, so it's not C. How about D? It reduces turgor pressure in stems. In fact, it does the exact opposite. So reduce turgor pressure means make flabby, or how do I explain this word? Make very weak. So we know when water comes in, the turgor pressure increases. It gets tighter and fuller. So in fact, this structure makes wait, let me come back to it. This structure will in fact increase turgor pressure, okay? So that's why this one is not correct, okay? Because it actually brings water in, making it tighter and stronger. So that's why the answer is B. So this was really a tough question, to be honest. It's quite a hard one, but if you're well familiar with this diagram, and again, if you don't understand anything what I'm talking about here, you need to watch the videos that I made, the teaching videos, or watch anybody else's videos, whoever's you like, and just make sure you get the concept before you do these questions. Otherwise, you might get demotivated and think you don't get it, even though in reality, it's really simple once you watch the video. Okay, so now we get on to the next one. Where does translocation of sugar occur in a plant? So we just said translocation is basically the movement of sugars in a plant stem. So we know what happens in the phloem. Now, here is a picture. Let me show you this. This picture is essentially this. If we have a plant here and we dissect it in two places, if we dissect it in the stem, so this is the roots down here. This is the roots, here's the stem. If we look at the stem and we look at from the top, what we'll see is this, okay? Now we know that translocation of sugars happens in the phloem. Now the question is, which one of these, A, B, C, or D, is the phloem? So here's a diagram that you need to understand, need to memorize it, okay? Or at least try to understand it a little bit. But you can see here that the phloem is basically this part here, okay? So if we come back to this picture, it's essentially B, okay? They're pointing at this outer part here, because this C would be the xylem, right? Because the xylem is the inner part, and the center part is the pith. So D would be the pith, I guess, and A would be what? What would A be? A would be kind of like this cortex, the cortex, okay? So we know it's going to be B. Okay, so this just shows you need to be familiar with this structure, okay? Next one. Which letter identifies phloem? So again, now they're zooming in a bit more. So here, they showed you the whole stem. Now they're zooming into a small part and showing you a real image. Okay, so they're zooming in now to the edge and showing you a real image. Let me show you my real image. So here's my real image. So this is the one we have, and this is the real way it looks like. In this picture, they're essentially zooming in to like a corner here, okay, and showing you that. So we know the phloem is the inner part. And another way to identify it by looking at a real image is that the phloem is these big circles, Notice how this location, which is the phloem, has, that's the xylem, right? So that's the xylem. The xylem has this as the big circles, whereas the phloem has in fact the smaller circles. So if we're looking at my picture here, when we look here and we see here the xylem, we know the xylem has big circles, whereas the phloem in fact has smaller circles, okay, much smaller. So if we come to their zoomed in image, we know C is pointing at these big circles. These big circles is going to be the xylem. So we know that we're still looking for this circle here, because that's where all the pipes are inside. So we're not going to look at this area here or A or anything like that. We're really looking at each of these individual segments, except we're looking for an arrow that points towards the smaller circles on the outside, right? Because we know the phloem is towards the outside, not the inside. Okay, so it's going to be B, highly likely B. Once again. Okay, let's move on to the next one. In which modified structures are sugars stored in an onion bulb? So first of all, what is an onion bulb? So an onion bulb is basically an onion, okay? It's just another name for an onion. And we know they're grown in the soil and they can have leaves. And this is the onion that we really know, this part, right? This part makes you cry, okay? So now they're asking, in which modified structures are sugars stored in an onion bulb? So is it A, the stem, or B, the root, C, the flower, or D, the leaves? So remember going back to this image here, right? We have a source and a sink. Now we know the source is where the sugars are made and stored. And then after, when the sink needs it, the source will send it, okay? So what is an example of a source? What is an example of a source? Let me show you. A source is typically going to be a leaf, okay? I made this wrong here. This is the phloem. So the source can be anything that makes the sugars and amino acids, okay? And that will typically be a leaf, and the sink would be the place that requires it, like the fruit, the seeds, even some other leaves, okay? So in which one of these could be a source? It's highly likely going to be the leaves, right? The leaves are the places that do photosynthesis and the places that can actually make sugar, okay? So it's definitely going to be D. It's not going to be A, B, or C because they don't do photosynthesis, or not as much as leaves, and they would rather be the places that would require the leaves to send those things that they made so these can use it, okay? So that's another, this is also a tricky question because first of all, if you don't know what an onion bulb is, you might be confused. But yeah, if you know what an onion bulb is, maybe you're a bit clear on it. Because we notice, right, there is leaves and stuff here, so they can still do photosynthesis and then send it to the rest of the sort of plant that can use it. Okay, yeah, this is the last one for this video. So, how are fluids transported in the xylem and the phloem? Okay, so we know that in our plant, there are two key pipes we need to know about, the xylem and the phloem. Now they have slightly different functions, but we saw right in this image that they are both always close to each other, okay? All the xylems are here, the phloems are here, and there are many of them, right? But they do slightly different things for the plant. So let's see. A, away from the root only. So that's true. The xylem carries water away from the root towards the rest of the plant that needs it, all the cells of the plant that need it. And only away. It doesn't bring anything from the leaves downwards. It doesn't do that. It's only from the root. So A could be correct so far. Let's see B, towards the root only. No, the phloem can transport things in both directions. So coming back to this image here, a phloem can transport things both downwards and upwards, depending on where the source and the sink is, right? Because for example, maybe there's this leaf here, and there's a fruit up here. So maybe the phloem can transport all the things that the leaf made upwards towards that fruit that's actually higher, okay? So phloem can transport in both directions, not just towards the root. So it's not A for that reason. Okay, so B is saying towards the root only. We know that's wrong because the xylem does away from the root only. So it can't be A or B. C, away from and towards the root. No, it only does away from. So it's got to be D through process of elimination, but let's confirm. For phloem, away from and towards. See, that's true. So this is one key difference you need to know. The xylem goes one direction, the phloem can go two directions. So that's it for this video. Now in the next one, I'll do another 5 multiple choice questions, and I can't emphasize enough how often your teachers will pick the exact past paper questions that I'm doing with you now, okay? They don't make their own questions, so the more you do, the more prepared you will be, and highly likely you'll see some of these questions on your class test.